Hi, welcome to Magnolia Grange. Magnolia Grange is a county and state landmark and also on the National Register of Historic Places. Magnolia Grange gets its name from a circle of 6 magnolia trees that used to be out front. Magnolia for the trees, and a grange would be a large farm. The original inhabitants here would have been William Winfree and his family. They moved in 1822 when the house was built, and Mr. Winfree was kind of a businessman. He had the property here, which consisted at the time of about 600 to 700 acres. On that land, he grew tobacco, which was an original cash crop here in Virginia. On the land, he also had grain that was conveniently ground in his own gristmill that was along Coldwater Run. In addition to the gristmill, the tobacco that he grew, the property that he had here, Mr. Winfree also owned a tavern across the street. It was very common for people to go to that tavern because if they had business at the court the next day, at the time, people couldn't make it from city to city in one day. It was expected for them to stay at the tavern. So they would go to the tavern and have some place to stay with their horses, have a place to eat, and have a place to sleep before they went into the courthouse the next day. So inside the house here, you'll notice there's Greek Revival architecture. The ceiling is a temple-like ceiling. It has rosettes surrounding it. There's an elliptical arch and also ionic columns. We'll see what looks like a mural here. This is actually wallpaper that was made by the Zuber Company out of France. It was hand-painted and made using the same stencils that they had back in the 1830s. Next, we have a Belgian glass lamp. And this lamp, of course, did not have light bulbs at the time. There would have been candles. And the smoke from the candles would rise up. To keep the smoke from damaging the ceiling, we have a hat or a smoke dome up top. On the floor here, we have strip carpeting. It's called strip carpeting because instead of having big 12-foot looms like we would have today, there were smaller looms that would only make 27-inch to maybe 36-inch pieces or strips of carpet. Those strips of carpet would be set down and then tacked together. Also in the hall, we have front and back doors. These could be opened for a breeze when there was no air conditioning in the home. Going along with the doors, that reminds me of the symmetry to the house. There would be a doorway on one side to match the doorway on the other. The number of rooms downstairs is going to be the same as the number of rooms upstairs. We have a fireplace in each room. And going along with the fireplaces, there would be chimneys inside instead of, like in colonial days, outside. These chimneys were on the inside because by Federalist days, everyone wanted to have a clean line look to the outside of the home. Next, we have the parlor. This would have been the best room, the great room. This was where the Winfreys wanted to impress their company, so everything here is going to be very lavish. When the ladies finished with their meal in a nearby dining room, they would come here to the parlor and could sit at a parlor table like this one. They could chat with each other, play games. Dominoes was a popular game of the Federalist era. We also have cards that would have originally been hand-painted and would have had no backs to them. To entertain themselves too, the ladies could have gone over to a little music station. They were very limited, at least during colonial days and likely during the Federalist era that followed. In colonial days, women were not allowed to play a violin or a flute. Those were for men because it would have required a lady to raise her arm and show her elbow or contort her face to play an instrument like that. She would have been limited to just a harp or a harpsichord, which would have been like our modern day piano. Going along with what ladies would have done, we have a fire screen here that has needlework to it. It was very common for women to work on sewing projects. Sewing allowed them to prove that they were capable of running a household. So there's sewing on the front. We also have to the back of the fire screen a little key that could be turned. That way, you could tilt the panel to keep the heat from being directly on the face when you sat by the fire. This was helpful to the ladies because if they were sitting by the fire, they didn't want to look like they had flush-looking faces as if they had been outside doing manual labor. That was unladylike as well. Next, we have the dining room. And going from the parlor into the dining room, originally there was a wall. This was taken down in the mid-1800s and replaced with folding doors. The folding doors would allow for more versatility. This way, the rooms could be closed off. You only had to heat one room at a time that way. Or if there were a large gathering, say there were a wedding, a party, or a funeral. Before there were funeral homes, there were funerals in the homes. So this could be expanded to one large room for a big gathering like that. Next, we have the John Marshall table. This was given by Chief Justice John Marshall to his son when he got married in 1830. The high chair kind of matches the table and chairs here. And the high chair was a very versatile piece too. The chair would allow a baby to come up to the table, sit with the family, to have a meal. But if the baby grew to be a toddler, he or she could have his or her own table and chair. The high chair could be separated. There's a rod in the center. So this could be unscrewed and the table and chair would come apart so he or she could have his or her own table. Considerably older children would have been in another room of the house, likely a nursery, taking their meals. They had to kind of be able to graduate and be allowed back at the main table with the family once they had learned how to converse properly with the adults and when they could use proper manners as well. Also at the dining room here, we have Greek Revival architecture again in the ceiling medallions, and also we have Greek Revival architecture in the egg and dart of the crown molding. Finally, everyone always wants to know who the people are. I don't want to neglect the portrait here. This is of James Wiley Winfree. He was a first cousin of William Winfree. So if the ladies gathered in the parlor after their meal, the gentlemen would retire here to the study or the office. The gentlemen here could chat with each other, smoke cigars, talk politics, and there would be business meetings held here as well. Mr. Winfree could have business associates of his enter and exit through the side door so as not to disturb the rest of the household with their comings and goings. At the side here, we have a couple of different maps. This is the Fry Jefferson map on the bottom. It's the Virginia, Maryland area as of 1755, and this map was created by Josiah or Joshua Fry and Thomas Jefferson's father, Peter, who was born in Chesterfield County. Above the Fry-Jefferson map is going to be the U.S. as of 1820. This is around the same time Magnolia Grange was built. So to give you an idea of what the U.S. looked like at the time, Virginia and West Virginia are combined, and on this map, California is considered as unexplored territory. We talked a little bit about the side door and how gentlemen would enter and exit the house this way, but at this time we're going to talk a little bit about the door itself and how it's decorated. This would be a pine or poplar wood door. It would be very plain, but it would be dressed up with a style of painting called wood graining. Wood graining could have been done with these little rollers here. And you can see the knots in the little stamp there to give that texture to the door. We also have texturized painting over here at the mantle. There's green in the background, and black paint could be swirled on top, applied with just a turkey feather, and this would give the marbleized effect. Above the mantle, we have argan lamps, whale oil lamps, predecessors to kerosene. And just above the lamps, we have pictures of members of the Cob Mill family. We'll talk a little bit more about the Cob Mills later on. At the side here, we have a hutch. It's a solid wood hutch, and it has drawer pulls that were made out of sandwich glass from the Sandwich Glass Company out of Sandwich, Massachusetts. In the center of the room, We have a bowl here. This is a replica of some of the bowls that originally were used at the tavern. Shards of these were found out on the grounds before the parking lot to Magnolia Grange was built. Also at the floor, you may see some tack marks where strip carpeting, the original strip carpeting to the house, would have been taken up. And there's a floor cloth. The floor cloth is actually made out of a ship's sail. So there's canvas on the bottom. There are several layers of paint on top and several layers of varnish to seal that off. But this was a predecessor to linoleum. You'll notice upstairs here, everything is going to be much plainer. This was just for family and close friends. No company to impress up here. The painting is going to be a Martha Frances or Pank walk. Pank was a friend of the Winfrey family. Her father was the family physician for the Winfreys. Also here at the second floor, we have a couple of different kinds of spinning wheels. A small one like this would have been used for flax, and larger ones would have been for cotton or for spinning wool. We also have a model of the Magnolia Grange area as of 1830. This will include parts of the original 600 to 700 acres of land and also parts of the courthouse side. Here we have the Winfrey Room, called the Wintry Room in honor of the family who lived here during Federalist days. And everything in the room is going to be Federalist in style in honor of that family. You'll notice here there's no canopy to the bed. That was a colonial thing. By Federalist era, everyone thought that it must be unhealthy to be cooped up in a bed like that. So they wanted a fresh, open air bed. So here we have a French sleigh bed. There's a little curve here where the mattress would be. This would be where the feathers would gather. And to keep the feathers from clumping up like that, a dowel rod from the side of the room will be taken. The dowel rod would be used to beat down the feathers, and then the dowel rod would be rolled like a rolling pin to roll the mattress smooth. The pictures in the Winfrey Room are going to be of Christopher and Cornelia Winfrey. They were first cousins of the Winfreys. In the corner, we have a cheval mirror. This would be a tall, full-length mirror that would have legs on either side to balance it out. At the chair, we have a hat box. Today, when people would travel, they would just roll up a car window. But in Federalist days, people didn't have that kind of option. Instead, they would be outside in the elements, in the dirt, in the wind, with the mud, and they didn't want to wear their good hats outside for fear they would be damaged. So instead, their hats would be kept nice and intact in a hat box. At the fireplace, we have a bed warmer. The bed warmer would have coals from the fireplace set inside the brass portion, and then the handle would be used to run along the bed and heat up the sheets. There were several outbuildings to Magnolia Grange. Among those outbuildings would have been an outdoor bathroom that was then called a necessary or an outhouse. With there being an outhouse outside and there being no bathroom facilities, no plumbing, indoor plumbing in the house, if someone were sick, maybe it was cold outside, rainy, it was the middle of the night, and that person didn't want to get up and go outside to use the restroom, there would be restroom facilities inside the house as well. There's a pitcher and basin for the sink. On the second shelf there's what looks like a butter dish. This is a toothbrush holder, and you might get a chance to see the toothbrush in there. On the floor, we have a slop jar for wastewater, and also by the slop jar is going to be a chamber pot, which was an early form of a bedpan. At the vanity, we have a leather key basket. This would have been made of cowhide or maybe pig skin, and this would be where the lady of the house would have kept control of all the keys. Keep in mind, at the time there was no security system to the house, and the nearest bank would have been in Richmond. Again, it was very difficult to make it from city to city and get back in the same day, so it was very inconvenient. That's why valuables were kept in a basket like this one. Next to the vanity, we're going to have what looks like a gravy boat there. That's a pap dish. Pap was a mixture of egg, sugar, and milk that was used for the nourishment of babies or for the sickly. Again, there was no hospital, no IV, and no other means for folks at this time to receive their nourishment if they were ill. Also at the vanity, we have a curling iron. This was made out of actual iron. There's a base in the back, and the poker could be pulled out, set at the fire to heat up, and then used to curl ribbons or cuffs. We're going to conclude here with the cradle. This would have been perhaps where Rosalie, the youngest member of the Winfrey family, would have slept. She might have been in a cradle like this one. And that brings up another good point about babies at this time. They were not born at a hospital. They were most likely born at home and delivered by midwives. Here we have the alcove. This was originally an extension of the Duval room, which we're about to see. This way, this gives you more of an idea of what the symmetry to the house would have looked like, because the Duval room is going to look very small in comparison to the other rooms. Here at the alcove, we have pieces that belong to members of the families who lived here throughout the years. It wasn't just the Winfreys. Here we have a picture of Judge Daffrin. Judge Daffrin was the last private owner of Magnolia Grange. We also have in the case an 1833 coin that was found under the steps of Magnolia Grange during restoration. Also in the case, we have some daguerreotypes, early pictures. These are pictures of the Duval family, and we're about to hear a little bit more about them. Also, a handkerchief that belonged to the Duval family. And over on the side here, we have a license to keep an ordinary. Ordinary is another word for tavern. And below the license for the ordinary, we have a frame that will contain pieces that were found on the grounds here. We have china. We have a little teacup from a child's tea set, and also pig's teeth. At the alcove, I mentioned the Duval family. Stephen Obadiah Duval II was the head of the household here. He lived here from 1858 until he passed away in 1872. His wife stayed on until 1876. Above the mantel here, we have pictures, enlargements of the daguerreotypes that we saw in the alcove. But these are pictures of the parents and some of the 9 children. You'll notice no one in these pictures is smiling. Chances are that's because when these pictures were taken, it would take 2 to 3 minutes to have those pictures taken, and no one could hold a smile for that length of time. Next we have the bed. This gives you an example of what a rope bed would have looked like. Underneath the mattress, you see ropes interwoven. They're underneath the mattress. They look kind of like a hammock. If you go to lie down on a hammock, that's going to sink down. To keep that from happening, you would take a wooden key to the side of the bed, tighten up the ropes, and that's how we get the expression sleep tight. It's actually a colonial expression, as is don't let the bed bugs bite. Early mattresses would have been sheets stuffed with hay, corn husks, feathers. They would have easily attracted bugs. Bugs could have hatched in there. Underneath the bed, we have a trundle. This was an early form of a bunk bed. This could be pulled out or maybe rolled out with wooden casters and allow for additional sleeping room. Above the bed, we have a variety of different dolls. The dolls would have been handmade out of items that were just laying around the house. There are dolls made out of paper. We have one made out of string, nuts, and we also have some handkerchief dolls. It wasn't until after the Civil War that a doll like this one in the corner with a china head and leather hands would have been constructed in a factory. The last room we'll see at the house is the Cob Mill Room, also called the Victorian Room, because this is in honor of the family that lived here from Victorian days up through about 1970. Among the members of the family who lived here, among the members of the Cob Mill family who lived here, would have been Marcus Aurelius Cob Mill I, his wife, Emma, his nephew, Nathan, niece, Molly, and Emma's daughter from a previous marriage, May. Back here we have pictures of Emma in the hoop skirt, and above her is May. It's thought that May have helped her mother make this Victorian crazy quilt. Called a crazy quilt because we have a wide variety of shapes of fabric, different textures of fabric, and different stitches. Many of these pieces would have had pictures, as you see here. And in this case, we have initials of members of the Cob Mill family, so that kind of personalizes it. The quilt, again, belonged to the Cob Mill family, as did the walnut high back bed. You'll see how ornate the headboard is. That was characteristic of Victorian style, lots and very lavish pieces. Other lavish pieces of the Victorian era would have been marble countertops. The marble tabletop here has a pitcher and basin on it. The pitcher and basin belonged to Mildred Daffrin when she lived here. She was born at Magnolia Grange. The pitcher and basin belonged to her family. One of the dolls in the room belonged to her as well. And she was proposed to sitting in this chair back when it was in the parlor. Earlier on in the office, we touched on the fact that there were pictures of members of the Cob Mill family there. We see their pictures again here in the Cob Mill Room. This is Philip Valentine Cob Mill and Julia Trueheart Cob Mill. When Marcus Aurelius Cob Mill I passed away, and Emma went to sell the property, she sold it to Philip Valentine Cob Mill, who was his nephew, and Julia Trueheart Cob Mill would have been the niece. So this will bring us up to present day with Judge Daffrin giving the property to Chesterfield County when he moved out. Chesterfield County, along with the Historical Society of Chesterfield, opened the house to the public for tours in 1986. And we'll conclude our tour outside where the outbuildings would have stood. This first wooden frame here was likely where the smokehouse would have been. The smokehouse would have been used for smoking usually pork products. Next we have another wooden frame that has some brick to it. This would have been where quarters for enslaved workers would have been. And on the far side, this would have most likely been space for a laundry room, kind of a multi-purpose room with laundry, a space for storage, and also for the kitchen area. The kitchen would have been set off from the main house to keep smells from the cooking and the heat from the cooking from being inside the house too early. And also, in the event of an accident while cooking, hopefully a fire would have been contained outside and would not have easily spread to the house. Thank you for taking our virtual tour. Keep in mind that during the year, Magnolia Grange has not only tours of the house, but we also have a wide variety of teas, Saturday lectures, craft activities, and other programs. For more details on these programs, go to www.chesterfieldhistory.com or www.chesterfield.gov. Thank you again.